meet our new superintendent, Mr. CJ Kamik, who I'll be introducing in just a minute. Thank you to all of you who have submitted questions over the last week or so, and we're going to try and get to, we were able to categorize them into themes, and so we hope to get to all of your questions, and if not, we will have an opportunity to do a frequently asked questions at the end of this. So I would like to start by introducing who is on the call today. And I'm just going to look on my screen and introduce everybody. We have Brian Benvenides from Glenmore. We have Christopher Wood. We have David Thornley, Walter Lewis, Diana Brumbaugh, Robin Surt, who is from our district office in charge of elementary education, Johanna Cho from Parkmont, Zach Larson, who is Director of Secondary Education, Brian Kilgore, our PIO, the Public Information Officer, Bob Moran from Washington High School, and Rosalinda Cuevas Carrero from Vallejo Mill. And we're thrilled to have the whole Washington attendance area here, and I look forward to an engaging evening. With that, I'd like to introduce CJ Kamik, our superintendent. He's going to explain just a little bit about himself, but I wanted to tell you that as part of the, and CJ's heard me tell this story before, but as part of the interview process, we had to go out and do reference checks, of course, and my task was to interview board members from his previous district. And when I saw the tears in their eyes, I knew that we were making the right choice in recruiting away CJ from Martinez. So while I felt horrible to do that to them, I was very excited about bringing CJ to, one of the people to bring CJ to Fremont. So with that, I'd like to introduce our new superintendent, CJ Kamik. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Trustee Burke, and I want to thank you and all of the trustees for this opportunity to lead and serve the community of Fremont and Fremont Unified School District. My approach to leadership is really that. It is a servant-based approach, and I believe that my role is to see how I can help the organization and the individuals within the organization function at the highest possible level and see what I can bring forward to help continue to propel Fremont Unified forward. We know that it's a district with a long history of excellence, and we also know that there are things within Fremont that we need to continue to work on improving. And I look forward to lending my leadership and my voice to the conversation on how we do that. And I also want to thank our educators, our classified staff, and our administrators for a warm welcome, and even more importantly, such an amazing start to the school year. I want to also thank our students that I've had a chance to talk to individually and through a few different student forums, and parents that I've had the chance to meet and talk to for such a warm welcome as well. There were a large number of things that led me to apply for this position, and I feel very fortunate to be selected to work in a district that has such talented leaders, such great educators and classified support staff across the district, and such an involved and committed community. So I am very grateful to be here, and I look forward to being part of the community and building relationships throughout the community. I'm trying to do that now, although admittingly it is a little bit different to do that in a digital forum. But once we move into more in-person activity, I look forward to meeting more of our viewers in person. So thank you very much to everybody for the warm welcome. And I'm really grateful to all of our viewers for being here tonight so we can have a little conversation within the Washington attendance area community.
Thank you, CJ. You touched on something that I think is on everybody's mind, returning to school. But the topic really is about distance learning. And I would like for you to perhaps explain a little bit about how distance learning has gone so far. And I'm sure we'll want to hear from some of our administrators. I will say generally that when I met with our Washington attendance area principals, all of them have said what a phenomenal job their teachers are doing and how impressed they were and engaged, and the students were engaged, and so that was heartwarming. So if you could expand a little bit from a bird's eye view at the superintendent's level, and then if we could hear from our administrators about distance learning, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Trustee Burke. It'd be my pleasure. And as I said in the beginning, my compliments to our administrators and to our teachers and educators and support staff, as well as our paraprofessionals and our classified staff across the campuses that have supported distance learning. When I took over, we were really just starting to gear up full speed ahead for the start of the school year. And the product that we have put forward for distance learning, while not perfect, has been something that I am remarkably impressed with. And as part of that, I've been very impressed by the continued work of all of the people that I've mentioned previously to not only engage in the process and roll up their sleeves, but to continue engaging in problem solving solutions. And I collaborate with superintendents across the county, across other counties and other parts of the state. And I can say very comfortably that I am impressed, as impressed with our distance learning program and the work of our students and our teachers as I have been with any others that I've seen. And I really can't go beyond that without also extending a compliment to our families and to our students. Our families have really stepped up to be a part of this process, along with how much our educators and support staff have stepped up to meet this challenge head on. And our students are also stepping up. As many of you know, I have my own children. I have an 8th grader and a 5th grader. So I am on this distance learning journey with you. And I know for my own children, they have had to make some substantial changes in how they have received instruction and learning. And I know for our families, there have been a lot of changes as well. But from a global perspective, in terms of looking across the district, there are things that we can continue to improve on without a doubt. We always want to make sure we're looking at access and equity and the overall quality of our program. But from a broad strokes perspective, I have been remarkably impressed with the distance learning program that our staff have put forward across our school sites. And I think it would be great if we could hear from some of our administrators who are seeing some things firsthand.
Well,
Who's
go ahead,
going?
Walt.
I think you might be on mute, Trustee Burke. Sorry.
No, thank you. What I was saying was I didn't unmute in time, and I didn't. Maybe to help with ease of the flow, if you'll just raise your hand, and then I can. So Walter, Mr. Lewis, please go ahead.
So, you know, popping into classroom, we've seen some amazing lessons going on. So the transition to distance learning has been going very well. I see teachers establishing connections with students and the office staff and staff in general able to do so even in a distance learning format. I've really seen our community come together as a community and really being able to show grace and patience to each other in this new learning that we've all been taking a part of. You know, there have been some challenges. You know, learning the technology is a steep learning curve for our students and for our teachers. You know, but I think above and beyond that, we've also been trying to help teachers really balance the workload in this new learning and really achieve that work-life balance that is so important. And finally, I think one of the challenges is to continue to put our emphasis on the social emotional learning, really important to every single student. So I think it's going very well, very proud of Centerville community for all that is going on and all that this year, our entire theme has been climbing the summit. And I see that we've got the tools and the personnel to climb that summit and hit that beautiful view. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to share their perspective from their school site? Mr. Wood?
Sure. Hi, I'm Chris Wood, principal of Maloney Elementary School. I'll actually go back to what is known as the infamous Friday, March 13th, when I brought my staff together and I told them, pack up and don't expect to come back this year. And it was absolutely phenomenal to see how they hit the ground running. I would challenge any Silicon Valley company to do what our teachers at Maloney Elementary were able to do in such short notice. And going to this year, I have seen it pick up even more tremendously. When we talk about themes, I heard Walter talk about their theme. Our theme this year is engaging with purpose and making sure that every individual on our staff has a purpose with distance learning. And I cannot say enough how much every staff member has really stepped up to engage our students and support distance learning. And that goes right down to our community as well. I'm so impressed with the students, with the families, and just the communication. I'm hearing great things from parents about what is happening in the virtual classrooms with our students. And they continually praise what's happening around Fremont and within the Washington attendance area. So very, very proud.
Thank you. Thank you. Would anybody else like to share some great things that are happening at their sites? Yes, Mr. Moran.
Yeah, this is Bob Moran, principal at Washington High School. I think Walt and Chris said a lot about the teaching that's going on. I just want to really emphasize how great the kids have been.
Mm-hmm.
We pop into classes and you see them, and the attendance has been fantastic.
Yes.
And their effort and their engagement has just been really kind of an overwhelming spectacle to observe. It's really been special. And I know that CJ, you are doing these with all the attendance clerks, and you can't have a favorite or attendance areas, and you can't have a favorite attendance area. But I do want to put a shout out for the Washington attendance area, for the best families and the best kids, and it's really the families that make this a great attendance area. So thank you.
And the oldest, we should say that Washington is a historic high, not the oldest in age, but the historic attendance area.
Right, our greatness had a head start.
Yeah. And I would just comment, as a parent myself, that I think the routine of being back in school has been wonderful for at least my child, and I'm assuming for everyone else, and that's probably why attendance is so high. Would anybody else? Yeah, Mr. Larson.
Yeah, I echo what Chris and Walt and Bob all said, and I really like what Bob mentioned about the kids. The kids have been phenomenal, and we are lucky in the Washington attendance area, but across Fremont, to have such phenomenal kids. And at the district level and our administrators, we are continually striving to do things for kids, to support kids. And one of those things our teachers, our classified staff, and our administrators have had to learn is new technologies that when we look forward to going back, which we will, we bring with us a whole host of new skills that can further enhance how our students learn. And I think that's exciting to be looking forward to that piece.
Thank you. I do have a follow-up question regarding groups of students. And so there have been concerns raised about students who might have a 504 or an IEP, and how distance learning might be particularly challenging. Can some of you address how that's been handled at your school sites? Yes, Ms. Cuevas-Guerrero.
Hello, I'm Ms. Cuevas-Guerrero. I'm the principal at Leo Mill. Again, I'm going to echo all of you, and I'm going to include our special ed team in that. Back in spring, when we were in crisis learning, as I would say, there weren't a lot of services that were being offered to special ed students or our special populations. And I really feel like we have a robust program for distance learning right now. We're actually able to engage in services for students. And it's been really positive. I mean, the student, especially our special populations, need that. They need that connection. And our teachers have really stepped up. Our parents have stepped up. It's so great to see the students too. I just have to say that like is a highlight of my day when I get to see students and they're like, "Oh, Miss Mavis is there," you know. But yeah, I really feel like we're moving in the right direction towards servicing our special populations right now in a much better and broader sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cho, I had seen your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say that despite being in distance learning, we're not ignoring the fact that there are new needs coming up. And so we are meeting with parents and creating 504 plans when it's appropriate and discussing strategies and accommodations and things that we need to do in order to, find success for our students. And so even in the short time that we've been back on campus, parents are very concerned, rightfully so. And we are just offering the support that we can. And just the teachers have been wonderful about, making these, just making accommodations when they need to and adjusting things so that students are not overstimulated or burning out from screen time or, whatever medical things may be coming up. It's just, we're just adapting. And I think that that's why we're seeing so much success.
Thank you. Ms. Brumbaugh.
When we're in person as schools, we have a lot of teamwork going on, but I also feel like teamwork is actually increased. There's a lot of concern and desire to care for all students now. And so I feel like people are connecting in ways that might be surprising. And I don't feel like there's any less teamwork occurring. If anything, there's a little bit more to support students in the distance learning model. So I've been pretty impressed with that. We do have our school nurses teaming up with us, and we have our paraeducators working with our students and teachers, and we have structures set up at schools to work together to address the needs of all students. So
Thank you. Mr. Thornley.
David Thornley, Cabrillo Elementary. Obviously the pandemic is presenting a lot of challenges for all of us, but challenges often present opportunities. A traditional way of delivering support by our resource specialists would be a pull-out model, which is an old model. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing our resource specialists pushing into the classroom. And one thing I foresee occurring because of how we've been having to change our mode of instruction is that when we do come back to a normal instruction, I believe we're going to see more of a push and model in the classroom with our case managers supporting classroom teachers while supporting the children on their caseload. So, that's a real positive benefit of what has been a very challenging time for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thornley. Mr. Benavides, and then we're going to go on. Go ahead, please.
I just also want to highlight the work that's being done with our EL students, our English language learners. For sure, those families not knowing the technology piece of it, but we've been working together, and that bond between the campus and the home has been strengthened by this process. And I just want to shout out to all those families and the teachers who are giving that extra time for our EL students who need that extra time in order to be successful with regular standards and also their EL standards. So it's just been a highlight that I've seen in my school, and it's just been impressive to see everyone in this time of need.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Larson alluded to something that I think everybody is very curious about. It's on the front of our minds, distance learning, and then the other half of our brains is thinking about return to school. So Mr. Kamik, could you just give us a bird's eye view of what's happening on that front?
Thank you very much, Trustee Burke. There is a lot happening on that front across the state, across our county, and there are developments within Fremont Unified School District as well. So starting at the state level, I'm sure as most people know, there's a tiered system that was implemented by the state. And at the local level, I'm sure people know and understand that Alameda County has recently moved into the red tier. And while the state set specific criteria for what is permitted, it's important to note that Alameda County Health still maintains the authority to, as they see fit, be more restrictive in some cases. And so there's kind of a duality that happens there with the local and the state agencies. And within Alameda County, Alameda County Public Health has stated that for elementary schools, they could reopen October 13th because we are in the red tier. However, I want to be very clear that it does not mandate that schools reopen October 13th. That decision still remains with each LEA, which stands for Local Education Agency, most commonly referred to as a school district. So even though Alameda County is in the red, the decision about when we return to in-person instruction still remains one for Fremont Unified School District to make individually. That being said, as we analyze the return to in-person instruction, I think it's important to note many things, and I'll try and highlight a few of them. One of them is that it is not a full return to instruction in a pre-pandemic model. Any return to instruction would still include things like 6 feet of physical distancing, the mandate for face coverings, screenings for employees and for students on a daily basis. And one of the things that I think is also very important to take into account is that for all of the school plans that I have seen from other districts recently, based on the requirement for physical distancing, where most classrooms in the state of California are designed at around 950 square feet, it means that we can't put all of our students in one class. And that means we need to develop different cohorts, and in most cases, an A-B schedule for students. And when that happens, we're talking about a situation where our students may not be going to school every day, or if there were, for example, an AM/PM schedule identified, that it would mean that students are only in for in-person instruction a shorter amount of time. And of all the models that I've seen, most districts have looked at a hybrid model of instruction, and there are pros and cons to those things. Certainly, nothing replaces the benefits of in-person instruction in our more traditional comprehensive school environment. But as we look at a return to in-person instruction, there's a lot of things that we have to weigh out in terms of the pros and some of the unintended consequences as well. One of the things we want to be very, very cautious of is moving back too quickly and having our students go through a situation, and our families and staff, where they're returning for in-person instruction and then returning to distance learning, and putting them in a situation where they're continually moving from one platform to the other. When we look at a return, obviously, as has always been the case, the safety of our students, our staff, and our community is paramount. That has to be the first focus in every conversation. That being said, the Alameda County Health Department and the Alameda County Office of Education have just recently today released some updated information on what school districts should be considering as they design a safe plan for a return to in-person instruction. Many of our viewers may be wondering about elementary versus secondary. Right now, the county has laid out a system where they're going to set forward different time markers as we move forward of when school districts can bring these age groups back. Again, to note, that decision is one for each local school district to make. Point to highlight, though, is one of the criteria that we will need in a safe return to schools is stable cohorts. And that is generally a easier operation to identify when we talk about our elementary school structure, as opposed to our secondary school structure. There's a little bit more control over a classroom of elementary school students in terms of how we design their environment and control the cohort grouping, as opposed to the secondary environment where students may be changing classes 6 times a day or 3 times a day, depending on if they're on a block schedule or a more traditional schedule. So all of those things are things that we're taking into account. Obviously, we also have to engage our community in conversation around this return, our labor partners in conversation around this return. And the next time that we're going to be having a broad conversation about this is at our November Board of Education meeting. And until then, we're going to continue to look at the data, continue to engage our stakeholders in conversations. And I also want to highlight that there was a lot of work done on this front before my arrival. And a lot of it will be pulling in that information that had already been a product of the great work of stakeholders throughout the community and the staff on a return to in-person instruction. So certainly a lot going on there, and we are very focused on how we can safely and securely at the right time return our students for in-person instruction. But there are a lot of variables that need to be considered before we get to that point.
Thank you. And you had mentioned the work that had gone on before, and I think you're referring to the task force. Is there going to be another kind of task force, or if parents or community members are interested in being engaged going forward or providing comments on returning to school, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Well, I don't have that definitive plan ironed out yet, because one of the things that we were waiting to do is review the updated information from Alameda County Public Health and the Alameda County Office of Education. As all of us can imagine, I'm sure our viewers can as well, I have a meeting on this topic about every week. Tomorrow is my next meeting with the County Office of Education and County Public Health with all the other superintendents from Alameda County. And once we have that updated information, I expect to be able to give our community more information and our staff more information about where we'll be reaching out to make sure that their voice continues to be heard, because there's a lot that has changed since the summer as well. And the other part that obviously is a new development is we're not quite sure how everything is going to react as we approach the traditional flu season, as well as continuing to battle a pandemic at the same time. So we will make sure that there's ample opportunity for engagement, and I look forward to being able to give our community more information about that in the very near future.
Thank you. Do any of the administrators want to comment on that, or we'll move on to the next hot topic, if we may? And this is somewhat related to, I mean, everything is related to COVID these days, but this is the general state of the state, if you will, the state of our budget, because we know that it's, we were already in a period of having to make some cuts prior to the pandemic, and now that's exacerbated even more. So if you could perhaps just give us some highlights, I think, on the budget and where we stand and what we should be expecting in the coming months as well as the coming years.
Thank you. I'd be happy to. And I think, as everybody can understand, our economy is in a very difficult position amidst the global pandemic. And there's probably a 3-hour workshop that we could do for public school funding in the state of California. And that's something for another time and another place. But in terms of a general concept, which I'm sure many of our viewers understand, I know our staff understands, the way public schools are funded in the state of California, when the revenues from California are up, school funding is better. I won't say that school funding is always up, but it is better. When revenues are down throughout the state of California, school districts suffer significantly. And so as the economy of the state goes, so does public school funding for the state of California. As we see a decline in our state economy, as you can imagine, we'll see a decline in our funding for schools. As we approached the start of this year, we anticipated a 10 to 15% reduction in revenue. And we did not actually see that reduction because at the state level, the governor and the legislators passed a budget which kept us close to kind of what I would call flat funding, close to the same amount of the money that we got last year. Unfortunately, the costs don't stay the same, so we have an impact there. And what the other part of the budget that is significant to understand is that that budget was built on deferrals. And as we read our national headlines, the state was counting on and hoping for some relief from the federal government in terms of additional stimulus dollars for education. Recent headlines today have made it a potential that we may not see that stimulus relief. If we don't see that stimulus relief from the federal level, the state has built in some time markers such as October 15th, where deferrals would go into place. And deferrals at the state level impact school districts, because what that means for school districts is the state is saying, you can spend the money, and when the state has it, we will give it to you. And as you can imagine, you generally wouldn't operate your family budget in that manner, and it becomes risky to operate any organizational budget in that fashion. Given those conditions, we, like many school districts in the state of California, are in a difficult fiscal position. Additionally, one thing that is unique to Fremont is that we are in declining enrollment. And when a school district enters declining enrollment, they see another decrease in revenue. Those things combine for the reality that we have some difficult work in front of us within Fremont Unified. Our current projections demonstrate that we may need to make $11 million in reductions for the 21-22 school year. So that people are clear on that timing, that means these would be decisions we make towards the end of this school year in the spring, and they would affect the next school year. In addition to that projection of 11 million, we are currently projecting the need to cut an additional 16 million in the year after that. So that gives us a substantial sum of money that we need to reduce from our budget or find revenue enhancements to offset those over the next 2 years. And when we talk about school districts, most of us can look around and recognize very clearly that there are not a lot of extras. So when we have to make those types of reductions, it will unfortunately impact our programs and our learning, and it impacts everybody across the district. And when we have to consider reductions like that, again, we will make sure that we are engaged in a collaborative process. We will be engaging our community in some budget workshops and community forums. We'll be engaging our labor partners in discussions around the budget and potential budget balancing solutions. And we will have some very difficult conversations, but as we have always done in education, we will find our way through this. We will keep students at the center of our thinking and our decision making. And we will find a path through these difficult times to a better time ahead. But that is where we stand right now fiscally. And I do look forward to engaging our community and our labor partners in that conversation, because I do not believe that any single person has all the best ideas. I believe that our best problem solving comes from our best discussions. So I look forward to having many discussions around this topic.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question, and one is you're talking about the district as a whole. What does that look like for school sites? How does that play out when we drill down to our elementary, secondary schools, et cetera? And then if you could also, on a side note, just explain a little bit about how there's an expectation that we plan for 3 years, but we only get money for 1 year, because I think that's very helpful in understanding the dilemma that we face.
Yes, I agree. I'll start with the 3-year budget requirement. The state of California requires that school districts adopt a budget every June for the next 3 years. And we know every year that the conditions change at the state level. And so each year our school district through the Board of Education adopts a budget for the next year and the preceding 2 years. And that happens every year. And we do that with the best information possible, but we also understand that those changes are significant. And not every state funds public schools the same way, but there is a significant impact in California with that, because no matter what we plan in a 3-year period, we're doing it based on the best information we have in the moment. And as that information changes, so do our projections. So the projections that I mentioned earlier of reductions, the next time those will likely change is in January, when we get the governor's proposed budget for the next year. And we'll adjust our projections based on that. In terms of what it means for school sites, it really depends on where we end up identifying budget balancing solutions. But where it can impact school sites can be staffing, it can be funding for supplies, it can be program. And in a school district, as it should be, in my opinion, people business. And in most school districts, 84 to 89% of the budget in a school district across the state of California goes to personnel. And so when you think about all the other things that a school district has to pay for in terms of supplies and services, there's not a lot of wiggle room within that budget. And unfortunately, when we start talking about significant reductions, we end up talking about program. And depending on those programs, that is where sometimes we see impacts across our school sites.
Thank you. And unfortunately, Fremont has been there before, as has the rest of the state when we were in a recession in 2008. So I know everybody is feeling still the effects of that, because when our governor a few years ago said that we were fully funded, he actually meant fully funded to 2008 levels rather than present day. So we're already operating behind, if you will, from that. Are any of the administrators interested in weighing in on how you've seen an impact at your school site, and what you've done creatively to try to fund and finance support programs? I don't mean to put you on the spot. Yes, Ms. Cho.
Thankfully at Parkmont, we have a very generous parent population who, whenever we ask for things, they support us. And so I feel very fortunate that we haven't had to really face much cuts to this point. I have been preparing the staff and parents through our PTA that, you know, their cuts are inevitable and changes will definitely occur. But we're going to do our best to maintain as much regularity as we can for our students, so that they don't feel it, because we want the students to, you know, still have high quality education and access. You know, I'm thankful for the parents that really work hard to be creative and find ways to help financially if we ask for it. So.
Thank you. Is anybody else interested in sharing some creative things that have been happening within your school sites, or even at the district? Maybe we could mention that FEF, the Fremont Ed Foundation, is partnering with community organizations and doing their 20 for 20 campaign, although I think everybody wants to forget 2020. But it's a way of supporting the technological needs that our students and staff have. And so it's a big fundraising drive, and maybe CJ or Zach, you're on the FEF board, if you wanted to elaborate a little bit on that.
I'm going to ask Mr. Larson to elaborate a little bit on it, but I am happy to say that I believe one of the most current numbers is that we're up above $100,000 in funds raised. So that is excellent. I don't know, Mr. Larson, if you have other information you might be able to share with us on those developments.
Yeah, no, CJ, you're correct that we have crossed that 100,000 marker, which is terrific. But there's still room for families to give their $20 per enrolled child, or whatever you're comfortable with. That could be higher or lower, to really support this effort. The way the MOU between FEF and Fremont Unified is written, the money has to go to technology to support education for kids. It's that simple. It isn't going to go to my salary or anything like that. It goes directly to support kids. And we do really emphasize for families to please give, because the bulk of our money right now is from, and we're grateful for it, but from our business partners within the city. But if families could support us, I'd be really welcome.
Thank you. That's impressive, over $100,000 in just a few weeks. So hopefully the word is continuing to go out and we can continue to raise more money. I'd like to, we've talked about how we want to avoid the impact on students as much as possible with our budget cuts. And so I'd like to get into a very student-centered conversation about our curriculum. In recent months, we have had many student forums where students have talked about mental health and microaggressions. They've expressed their concerns about inequity that happens in our district, about systemic racism in our educational system as well as in our curriculum. And so I wondered if somebody would be willing to talk about how Fremont is going to address these inequities, and also the core of what we do every day is our curriculum. What are we going to do about that?
I think it's such an important topic, and I'm going to ask the administrators on the call to share some of the things that they might be doing at their sites. And I know that our directors of elementary and secondary education can talk a little bit about what's happening from the curriculum standpoint in terms of novels and other things that we're trying to make changes with. But I think it's just such an important reminder that what we have to do is keep equity at the forefront of our conversations, that it can't be a discussion for the moment because it might feel timely. It has to be a discussion that happens in an ongoing fashion. If it doesn't stay at the forefront of not only the curriculum, but every decision and every conversation that we have, if we don't keep that at the forefront, then it allows the systemic piece to exist. And we have to have that conversation of equity in all facets of our school district and all operations of our school district, so that we can identify systemically where we're not serving our students properly or our families properly, and where we have some racial or social injustice taking place. And I've been very, very impressed by the conversations that I've been a part of with our staff, with our community, and really with our student population as well. There is a lot for us to learn from our students, especially the students who have not been served in a manner that is properly meeting their needs. And I think at that point, it would be great to hear from some of our site administrators and maybe from our directors about some of the things that are happening on a larger scale.
Yes, who would, Mr. Lewis, please do.
Sure. So I'd love to talk about Centerville's journey, really talk about our equity journey. Some very exciting things happening here at Centerville around equity. And, one of our main goals at Centerville is really to increase voice. And by that, I mean student voice, parent and family voice, and yes, staff and teacher voice. And so some of the ways that we're doing that, especially with students, are to really work with our African American Culture Club, our Latinx Culture Club, our social justice group, and our Gay Straight Alliance to really include decision-making opportunities and to really include conversations. For our parents and families, we're establishing an African American student concerns evening event and Latinx student concerns evening event as well. And for our staff, we're looking at data for equitable outcomes of success for each of our student groups and really utilizing that as a basis of conversation in all of our staff meetings. But also our staff is participating in a novel study of Not Light But Fire, How to Lead Meaningful Race Conversations in the Classroom. And it's really a powerful book that we've started and will be bringing back throughout the school year. So yes, we are really moving forward in our equity journey, and we invite the Centerville community to participate in that conversation. So that's what we're doing. We're very proud of our work, but we've got a long way to go. We know that, but we are up to climb that summit as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think as you do the work, hopefully it's spreading above to the high school area and down to the elementary so that we see that spiral of the work that you are doing. Mr. Larson?
Right, and it is. One of the groups that I am working with this year is the English Curriculum Council, and that's English department chairs from the middle school, junior high, and high school levels. The major focus that we are looking at is reviewing our core novels. And the core novels are novels that all children grades 7 through 12 are exposed to, and looking at adding to those novels, novels which are representative or more representative rather of who our students are and what their experiences have been. And at the same time, looking at reviewing our supplemental novels. And those are novels teachers have a choice to weave into their curriculum as they go through the year. But I am excited also, like Mr. Lewis is doing a book study with his teachers. I am doing a book study with the junior high principals and also one with the high school principals. But the junior high principals, we're going to begin reading a book called Black Minds Matter by J. Luke Wood, who's a professor and lecturer out of San Diego State University. So I'm excited to embark on that as we tackle this serious issue.
Thank you. Ms. Surt, can you explain elementary?
Yes, absolutely. So just like curriculum is important, I think we also have to look at equity through the lens of our practices and through the lens of discipline. And so I know our high school and our secondary schools have really focused on restorative practices. At the elementary level, we are embarking on work with PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Intervention Systems. We have 7 schools this year who are starting the training, and it's really about creating that positive climate on the campus where everybody feels welcome, but it's also learning to differentiate the needs of every child, and that discipline looks different for every student, and making sure that we're making the adjustments in our practice. So we're making sure that all students feel welcome. And so we've had a focus on shifting those practices at the elementary through the PBIS training. And then much like Mr. Larson, our elementary team is not doing a book club, but we are watching some podcasts and different webinars focused around equity and social justice, and having really in-depth conversations to really build we're starting with ourselves and really reflecting on our current practices and the shifts we need to make, because this work really starts with the individual, and how can we make change that we can then share with our staff to make change. So we're going through the podcast way, not necessarily the book club, but the teams have all been working really diligently and these are difficult conversations and they're uncomfortable, but I think everybody's rising to the challenge, because if not now, when, right? And now's the time to start these conversations.
Thank you. And I think it goes without saying, it's obvious that really who's going to benefit the most, not just us as individuals, but ultimately it's our students. So with what we're learning and imparting to them, and they bring that up and go forth and not to be corny, but to make the world a better place, to have that understanding. Is there anybody else who would like to comment on what's going on at their school site? Mr. Moran and then Ms. Cuevas Carrero.
Well, real briefly, a lot of great things have been said on this topic, but I do think the important piece for students to effectively learn in a classroom is they can't have a filter up. They've got to feel safe, right? And I think, unfortunately, sometimes kids don't feel safe in classrooms. And I don't think this is a purposeful thing on a teacher's part, but I think that sometimes we bring certain opinions or biases to how we lecture or how we explain instructional material. And I think the important thing is to start listening to student experiences and to listen to their voices. I know that all of the high schools participated in student support panels that were very informative and eye-opening. At Washington, we have a wonderful student who wrote a letter to staff that was a summation of concerns by a number of students that she's representing. And for the October staff meeting, she's going to be her and another student are going to be part of a group of kids that are going to speak to staff about their experiences. And we're working with her to create that presentation. And I think that the more we listen to student voices, the more aware we become of their experience, and the more we're able to create a safe space for them in our classrooms.
Thank you. They are the authentic voice of this experience. Ms. Cuevas Carrero?
Yes. So I just want to thank upper management also for bringing this to the forefront and making it a priority, a topic of discussion, and just to keep these, I call them courageous conversations going. And I, in turn, take those ideas and I share them with my staff. And then in fact, today at a meeting that I had with a group of teachers, we started engaging in these conversations and looking at how our own biases can affect the instruction in the classroom. And so how we, just like Robin said, we have to look from within. It starts with us. And so so I'm engaging in those conversations with my staff as well. And we have, at the elementary level, we are restorative practices school, and we also are going to be training in PBIS. We have we have character ed lessons that we engage our students in based on the 8 great traits. So we have a focus every month. And our counselor really helps out as well with guidance lessons. And our, I think the real important thing here is, as you've all mentioned, student voice, and to eventually, make the changes within ourselves to, again, change others. And yeah, I want a peaceful, happy society too.
Thank you. Mr. Kamik?
Thank you. If I may, I just wanted to highlight that one of the things that there's a few things that I really appreciate about the work that's happening. One is it was very evident through my application process and my discussions with the board that equity was a top priority for them. And that was very inviting for me because it is a top priority for me as well. And one of the things I have really appreciated about the work that's happening within Fremont Unified is what I would consider kind of a healthy balance of listening and learning while taking action. One of the things that I've been remarkably impressed with is the student voice, and that there does seem to me to be a great willingness to listen to that voice. And that willingness may be growing because of things that we are seeing related to racial and social injustice in our society. But I am very impressed with the willingness to listen. And I think, as we've heard tonight, there's a very broad commitment to learning what we can about how to address these issues of equity, but at the same time, we're taking action. I think there are too many times where there's a position to sit back and analyze and analyze and analyze, and then we never get to action. And I've been very impressed with the board's willingness to be a part of this conversation and to keep it on the forefront, and for our staff across Fremont Unified to engage in that dual path of learning and taking action, and understanding that there are voices that I can learn from, there are answers that I can learn about. And the more that I learn and understand, the better my practices can become, and the better I will be in having courageous conversations. And so I just want to compliment not only the administrators on this call, but members throughout our Fremont Unified School District community, including our board, for that willingness to learn and be active at the same time on trying to improve things that we can improve in a timely fashion, and things that we can improve over the long term as well.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate that this isn't just something we're doing today, for the next year or so, that this is an ongoing journey for us collectively as well as individually, and a commitment that FUSD has made to all of its students. So I'm very appreciative and grateful for that. We are just about at time. I think there is one other question that I wanted to get to, if we can, and that's related to facilities. Because that's first and foremost. We see construction going on at different sites. We do have Measure E that has been converting our junior highs to middle schools. There's been, I think almost every school has been touched by some kind of construction. What is the state of our facilities? If you can sum that up in 5 words or less.
Well, I think that's a great conversation, and certainly something that in my first 2 months I've been working hard to learn as much as I can about our facility operations and where our facilities are across the district. I know that our Measure E bond program has got a lot of projects going right now, and I've had a chance to tour some of those exciting projects. I know that our CBOC is doing a great job of engaging with our staff in conversations around the Measure E program. And the work that I've seen has been very exciting, whether it's been the revitalization of some spaces, or the transition for some of our middle school, junior high areas, and also even some of the things that I've seen as a former baseball coach. I really appreciated some of the nets that were going up around baseball fields. So sometimes it's big things, sometimes it's small things. But I've been very pleased with a lot of the projects that are taking place throughout the district. And I'd be happy to hear from some of the principals that might have things happening on their sites that are specific to some of those Measure E projects.
Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Okay, so tomorrow we actually are getting our first fencing for construction. We are moving from a junior high school model to a middle school model. And tomorrow we also have a site committee meeting really to talk about these first phases of construction. So by December, several buildings, several people in buildings will be in some temporary portables. And our demolition of a two-story build or of a few buildings here in the front of the campus will be coming down. Throughout this, all of this, though, we've really made a commitment to communicating with our not only our school community, but our surrounding community as well. Really trying to ensure that everyone knows exactly, what's going on and what the timeline actually looks like. But we're looking at, a 2.5-year process here. And, we are very excited about what this campus will be. And we're very excited about welcoming sixth graders into our school in 2.5 years.
But that doesn't mean the elementary schools want to give up their sixth graders. Is there anybody else who'd like to share? Mr. Moran?
Yeah, earlier, I guess late part of September, contractors came in. The bids are being submitted for the new Husky Theater, and that work is supposed to get started at the end of October, beginning of November. So that's exciting. And I also did want to compliment operations and grounds. I know that Washington is looking fantastic. They've got the entire campus really cleaned up. They've been really working on the fields, irrigating, trimming trees, and there's been painting going on. They got lockers going in, so that's exciting. So can't wait to have the kids come back to a nice, clean campus. So thank you.
Somebody had said earlier, opportunity in adversity, and that means we can do some of these projects on campuses that we normally would have to wait until the summer. So we are able to unfortunately take advantage of students not being on school sites right now. But I appreciate hearing from each of you on that. We are just about out of time. I want to reiterate what I said earlier in that we'll be putting together a frequently asked questions and posting it on the website. So if your specific question may not have been answered, hopefully you'll see it in the FAQ. I really am grateful for everybody taking their time this evening in the community to watch, and to the administrators and district staff, and of course to our superintendent, Mr. Kamik. Welcome again. You've all been wonderful in sharing your experiences and thoughts with the Washington attendance area community. I hope everybody stays safe and healthy, and we will certainly be in touch. As we get more information, it will be communicated out to everybody. Have a good evening.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.